Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello, and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. And in this particular episode, I'm going to talk about secret lives. I'm going to start this out because I'm going to obviously not name names because that's not the point of shaming anyone, but I'm just talking to those of you, my listeners, who might be able to relate to this. And you just might be able to relate to it. I'm just going to talk about it. I have an old acquaintance, and I have to say it that way because we dated for a very short period of time, and I was obviously not the guy who she decided to date. So we just kind of went our separate ways. And there was this sort of selection process, and what I will share is this thing kind of looped back around. I received a mystery phone call, and it wasn't a number that I had actually recognized, so I called back and found out it was her. So she was kind of letting me in on some of the details. Well, the long and short of it is this. She got involved with this guy who apparently was everything she wanted it to be in the beginning because it was through a dating website and put in her particulars and this guy pops out. But what ultimately happens, as I'm finding the story out from her, is that the guy's fairly toxic. Obviously my concern is, I hope she's okay. And I just kind of shared, hey, it just seems like there's some issues that are going on here because it seemed like she was being used financially. I mean, she obviously had resources and this guy tapped into it. But she's kind of got herself in a pickle and she didn't know how to get herself out of the relationship. Emotionally, she got herself really, really tied into this guy. And, just for my listeners, look, I am not playing social worker here because because she is involved with this guy, and I did what I could do as a friend and suggest that she might need counseling because she would obviously need a lot more help and direction than I can give her. And I don't want to come off as being biased, because if there is something to salvage in that relationship, then that's something that she's going to have to work on. But it is not something that I would be biased, I think, in my opinion, because I'm only hearing from what she's describing, and it doesn't sound very good. So what I did in this situation was give her my advice, which was that she needed counseling, somebody that could be more objective and help her deal with issues that have obviously reoccurred, because this isn't the first time. Because when I had the opportunity to really talk about her life in depth, there were other things, and it just seemed as though that this is a pattern. So the secret life part. Well, here's the thing that, and to the women who are listening, one of the things that I had always encouraged women to do is to take your significant other to meet your friends. And because oftentimes they can give you an objective view of this person, because as the individual who is in love with this person as the object of your affection, sometimes you're not very objective. But your friends may be able to see something that, they probably know about your past and what you're vulnerable to and that sort of thing. So with that, the instance of your friends being able to give you some objective comments, it might be helpful. Well, what I discovered is she obviously knew something was wrong because she didn't want to take him to visit her friends because there were some things that happened. And if they knew the whole story, they would tell her to run for the hills, which, I mean, it's kind of what I did too. But again, she's involved with a guy, and I certainly don't want to come between her and her love interest, because what I know is, the minute I, as a casual observer, begin to insert myself, now I have become part of the problem, and that's not something I want to do. But this is about secret lives. And the problem with that is now, if you're an individual that has this sort of thing going on, you have your secret life is you're not able to incorporate it in the rest of who you are, and you've had to compartmentalize this section in order to have this whatever it is that you've got going on. And some people are very good at that. Just as a generalization, men are considered good at compartmentalizing their lives because of the various roles that they play in their own humanity. So I'm not suggesting that men are good at cheating. That's, there's sort of this correlation that one might think that I'm accepting that's why guys are good at it. I'm not even trying to go there. I'm just trying to make the case that men and women think different. And this is a very masculine trait that she is showing, the compartmentalization. But what it's doing, it's that it's not allowing her to be in communication with her other friends, because she has to keep this quiet. And, I shared with her that I thought that the thing for her to do is to continue to think about it. She's obviously thinking about it. She's obviously worried about it, concerned about it, because as she was sharing with me, what's going on is she's trying to figure out how to get out of the relationship. Now, there and again, I'm not giving any advice on that because I don't want to come off as being biased, because this is her situation. I'm only hearing it from one side. And as I want to repeat, what I did is I suggested that she get counseling, somebody who can be her advocate, somebody who can be more objective, and hope that that situation works itself out. I'm not in communication with her to know what's going on. I figure if I hear about it, I hear about it. But I do wish her the best. But the thing about secret lives, and when you operate with all of these compartments and none of them connecting, you're not whole. And that has to do with the psyche. It's really important to be connected to self, because that's where being satisfied with yourself, that's where the self-esteem and doing things that please yourself. And therefore, when you build on that internal happiness, then you're able to spread that love, because your philosophy, whatever it is, it tends to give itself juice. It gives itself energy. And, you will find people asking, geez, why are you so happy? What is it that you're doing? Is it a new experience you've had in life? Or, for some people, you notice that when you take on something that you've wanted to do, how there's sort of a rejuvenation of your spirit. And being connected to self helps you do that. If you've gone through a difficult period, and when you've come through that on the other side, you learn something about yourself, about your life, and it's changed you, your philosophy for dealing with things, where now you get up in the morning and you say a morning prayer, or you've decided that you've had a health challenge and you're going to take it on so that you can be better, because you can see the benefit of doing those kind of things. Those things are rejuvenating, and it really lifts you from the inside out. That's the kind of thing that happens when you're connected to self. But when you're compartmentalized, those things don't tend to happen. You tend to be fragmented, to be segmented, and that it just tends to slow you down. That's my observation. And I've had to learn going through all of those experiences. I mean, there's many, many things that I like to do. But what I have learned to do is to connect them. I have a love of music, and it's the inspiration around being around creative people, musicians, artists, and things like that give me juice. And I'm not the jealous type in that regard. I love people who are creative because it inspires me, and that's that being connected to self. If I were a jealous person, and in that compartment were really angry about somebody else's ability to do something well, you could see how that would be a terrible waste of my time and my energy. Because when you think about the effort that we as individuals take at being good at something, and how in the world would I be able to catch up to somebody who's devoted years and years and years to something, and they have the ability to share that gift? See, that's an example of where being envious or being jealous of someone else's talent is a waste. I use those moments as inspiration to go and do the things that I like to do. So anyway, that's a bit of my own philosophy. Look, I'm going to take a break, and I'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. Jordan and Keith keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know.
Jordan and Keith.
From pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further, because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
Hello, and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. And in the last segment, I kind of ended talking about, being inspired by creative people. And I want to kind of launch into this part about speaking from the heart. And it's knowing how you feel about something and being able to share that tactfully, of course, because civility is always in style. But speaking from the heart, and this is what I try to do, and I share something about my own self, and I've tried to do more of that lately just to make things relevant, let you know that I'm not just some talking head, but really have experienced something about life. And I say this because it's the vulnerability, and it's the sharing of myself when speaking from the heart, because I definitely don't want to come off as being too preachy, but more so, I don't ever want to come off as being judgmental of someone else's circumstance. But I do try to give opinion and state it as such, and then therefore also give solutions, because as it is, having relationships is a lot of work. It's not just easy. It's great when they work well, but relationships do have times when things are a little rocky. And being able to speak from the heart, I want to give reference to this. Speaking from the heart is about sharing your feelings. And one of the ways in which you're sharing feelings is, and this is very elementary, therapists do this a lot, but they help you to understand that making I statements is very significant as opposed to making you statements. Because when you're sharing your feelings, you want to share how you feel, meaning you, the individual. And it's not about how somebody else makes you feel, because really you're in control of your feelings, and it's a very nuanced kind of thing to say, because I know we come up with the expectation somebody does something, we have a reaction to it, we say that they made us feel a certain way. Well, actually, you're in control of your emotions. And I can give you an illustration here. Quite often, you could hear something and you have a reaction to it, but there are those instances when what you're reacting to is your perception about what you hear, you see. So then and therefore, that's a quick example of why you're responsible for how you feel, because misinterpreting things is very easy. It's very common, and experience in life will teach you that, if nothing else. It's about pausing, taking a break, and really thinking about what's being said. And in life these days, we definitely do things in sound bites. It's how we operate. We move things very quickly. And media, we program things to get people's attention, get a reaction, and to get out. That's how things operate. But it's important for you to take a step back, slow things down a bit, and really think about with some depth. And as you do this with experience, with practice, then you learn to be in less of a reaction mode, and you're more thoughtful. And I think that's a very good tool for dealing with life, because we have knee-jerk reactions to things, and that's part of the human experience. And having less of that makes you more present to what's actually going on, meaning not having a knee-jerk reaction, but waiting. Just an experience in life teaches you this. I liken it to when there's an emergency. If you don't really assess the situation, you wind up being in reaction mode. You can do all kinds of things that make the situation worse. And when you've got experience, you don't necessarily see all the hands flying, but you see the precision of somebody doing something to help that situation and calm things down very quickly. I've watched with amazement. I've had the pleasure of watching. But I've had the experience. Let me say it that way. I've had the experience of watching doctors do some of the things that they do, that they've been trained to do with practice. They're very sure of themselves. They're very steady. And while there's a sense of urgency, there's also a sense of calm. They know what they're doing, and they, in effect, know what they want to achieve. They want a good outcome. And that I applaud. That's experience, that's skill, that's practice. And these are some of the things that I think we can do as individuals. And when it comes to speaking from the heart, which is what I want to circle back around to, being present to how you feel is the most important thing. And then when you're communicating those feelings, remember, we're making I statements. I feel a certain way when XYZ happens. And, it's not always about sharing bad news. I like sharing the good things. Like, I feel very alive when you touch my hand in the morning, or when we walk hand in hand as we're going from the car into the building. And I feel very, very close to you when you put your hand on my back as we're walking. I feel very connected. When you look into my eyes, when you write a nice note for me. See, those are some very nice, wonderful, romantic sort of kinds of thoughts, perceptions. And those kinds of speaking from the heart go a long way. Those create very good memories. And that's a very special thing to do. Some people think it's sappy, and I don't tend to buy that one. I know that it's, gushing and stuff like that it seems kind of difficult for a lot of people to do, because it seems a little too warm and a little too mushy. But mushy is good when it comes to love, because I believe that if you're willing to be vulnerable, you can have an awesome life. Because it's not about having the rough exterior all the time. It's about knowing that there's vulnerability there and it can be touched. That's a beautiful thing. That's a very beautiful thing. Vulnerability. It's harder, in my estimation, it's harder to be vulnerable than it is to be tough. And I'm going to use this analogy. You ever look at some of the great actors in life? The Meryl Streeps, the Denzel Washingtons, the Anthony Hopkins, the guy with Pirates of the Caribbean, Johnny Depp. One of the amazing things that these individuals are able to do is they're able to show their vulnerability, their depth. And it's because of that vulnerability is what gives their characters range. And I speak of actors because I know a few, and I've had this question to ask of them, and that was the response, is really being able to show vulnerability. I mean, I certainly wouldn't look at Denzel Washington and think that he's somebody that's not tough, because I wouldn't walk up to the guy and and pop off at him. I mean, the guy he's Training Day. If any of you saw that movie, he was tough. But if you've seen some of his other works, you also can see that he can be very tender and very emotional. And, there you go. Being able to speak from the heart. So I'm going to take another short break, and I'll be right back.
Golden State Media Concepts Social Media Podcast. Time to hashtag everything with
Mariano
and Pauline.
Hashtag Pauliano. We talk about all the fun, crazy stories on social media. From Instagram to Facebook, Twitter to Tumblr, or probably even Friendster. Join us each week as we explore the quirky side of social media. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Social Media Podcast.
It's simple, such a sad song. The one that we rely on to get us.
Hello, and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. Here's one for you. Now, this is the mistake of all mistakes. Now, I had a friend of mine left me a message. She had received a message that some guy that she was dating apparently sent a text message to her that was intended for somebody else. Now, if this has happened to you, folks, you know how embarrassing it is. Okay, how do you fix that? Well, first of all, there's going to have to be real disclosure. You're going to have to admit your mistake, and you're going to have to apologize, and you're just going to have to pick up where the mess left you, and you're going to have to talk about it. If in this particular case, the two, the man and the woman, they were opposite sex, they were really just friends. I mean, there was no physical intimacy or anything like that going on, but there was obviously some jealousy about this issue. Now, in my own understanding of the situation, the guy had made it clear that he was looking to date somebody else, and she didn't seem to be able to make herself available. Well, she really has no complaint. I mean, in the sense that it's not as if she were betrayed, like she were a girlfriend who was cheated on. But the thing about it, this is one of those things where the lines kind of got blurred, because she didn't really decide for herself if she was in or out. But he had made it clear, at least from what I'm hearing, he had made it clear that the relationship the two of them had wasn't really going to go far, because she just wasn't making herself available. And I mean, and in that case, the hard fact is it's her loss. She just has to deal with it. But I think the thing is, it's sort of an embarrassing situation. Not sort of. I mean, it is an embarrassing situation to have happen, because what he sent wasn't too graphic. It was just more of the kind of thing. The friend, the woman, she was a friend. Apparently, she didn't know about it. Now, was she privy to the private details of his life? Well, that's a toss-up. She knew other things, but she didn't know this one. And I kind of explained it that, well, this woman who the text message was intended for looks like she was becoming the primary relationship, and you were just the friend, as you had always been. So you really can't expect this guy to tell you each and everything. And for that reason, do you really have a reason to be upset? But I suggested that the two of them have a real conversation about their feelings and then to get past it, because if not, this thing is just going to fester. So that was my personal advice. I don't know if any of you have been in that situation where you've sent something of more of a romantic kind of text message to the wrong person. I mean, clearly, if it just kind of blasts out and the wrong person gets it is one thing, but if it's somebody that you may have had a relationship with, Like in this case, those two had been involved, but it just sort of melted into a friendship. And I think on some level, it really revealed her an interest that she had that she'd never really done something about. And I think that's what happens when you sit on the sidelines of these things. If you're not really invested in your life, if you're just kind of sitting on the sidelines, then these kinds of things are bound to happen, and it really shows up where you are in life. I just, before this last break, I talked about speaking from the heart and sharing feelings and being involved, being invested. And I certainly encourage that. And in this particular instance, I'm talking about an individual who did not do that. She sort of sat on the sidelines of her life being a spectator, and then found somebody who she was, maybe a little bit interested in, had moved on. And it sort of left her feeling a little bit broken. And from what I could tell, a little bit jealous too. Yeah, I mean, she was hurt, but a little bit jealous. But that's her own doing. That's her own fault. And she's going to have to come to terms with that if you become a spectator in life, as I said, these things are going to happen to you a lot. Meaning you're going to see your life just pass you by, and other people are going to get involved in things that you would probably wish you could at least participate in. And, when you're a kid, yeah, people ask you to join in because, you teach little kids things and kids are nice. But when you're an adult, that's not the case. You have to invest in it yourself. You have to put yourself out there. You have to be vulnerable. You have to take a chance, take a risk. And when you do that, when you do those kinds of things, it's, the results are the results. You're going to win a few, you're going to be great at it, and some you're going to struggle with, but that's the story of your life. You got to invest in your life. And I encourage you to do that every single day. And it's being involved, being invested, being there for the people you love helps the people that love you be there for you. It works. And I'm going to leave it at that. I'm John Johnson. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, and I want to thank you for listening.